I still remember the exact way the wind sounded that night, a sharp and hollow whistle that scraped against my ears the moment I stepped off the bus after my 12-hour shift. The cold was the kind that did not just sting your skin, but wrapped itself around your bones and settled there like it belonged. My breath came out in pale clouds as I tucked my hands deeper into my coat pockets and started the long walk toward our small apartment. It was supposed to be an ordinary night. Exhausting, sure, but ordinary. Instead, I saw something that froze my blood faster than the weather ever could. Under the flickering glow of the street lamp stood my daughter Lila, 7 years old. Her tiny frame wrapped in the thin pink jacket she insisted was still warm enough for winter. Her cheeks were bright red, her lips nearly purple, and her eyes looked far too big for her face. She was hugging her stuffed bear to her chest as if it was the only thing keeping her upright. I dropped my bag and ran. Lila lifted her head slowly, and when she saw me, she let out a small broken sound, half relief and half fear. I scooped her into my arms, her cold skin burning my hands. "What are you doing out here?" I whispered, but before I could say anything else, she pressed her face into my coat and murmured the words that cracked something inside me. "Mommy did not come home last night." My heart lurched because I am her mother. I held her closer as she trembled in my arms, her body shaking with cold and confusion. She was talking about her former foster mother, the woman who used to leave her alone for hours, the woman she still remembered in flashes of fear. I had spent years trying to undo those memories, but trauma has its own stubborn roots. The words came out again softer this time, like a ghost repeating what it could not let go of. Mommy did not come home. I knew then she had been waiting by that street lamp, hoping someone who had abandoned her long ago would somehow return. And in that moment, I realized something was very wrong because tiny footprints trailed away from where she stood, leading into the trees that lined the edge of the road. They were fresh. They were hers. And they were headed into the darkness. I held her tightly, my voice barely steady. "Did you go into the woods? Baby?" She nodded against my shoulder. I thought she was there. I thought she was calling me. A shiver that had nothing to do with the cold crawled down my spine. I took one step toward the tree line when the sudden rumble of an engine made me freeze. An SUV pulled up beside us, its headlights sweeping across the snow, illuminating the moment in harsh white beams. The door opened, and a tall man stepped out wearing a coat far too thin for the temperature. He moved quickly, not toward me, but toward Lila. Without hesitation, he took off his coat and wrapped it around her, tucking it securely around her shoulders before he even looked at me. "Are you two all right?" he asked, his voice steady in the icy air. That was the first time I met Daniel Cross, though in that moment, he was just a stranger with concern etched across his face. Before I could respond, Lila swayed in my arms. Her breathing hitched her eyes, unfocused, and I felt her body go limp. Daniel stepped forward instinctively, catching her head with one hand to keep it from lolling back too far. "She needs heat fast," he said, his tone sharpened with urgency. "Let me help." I nodded because I had no choice. The cold was stealing her faster than I could think. As he lifted Lila gently from my arms, her small hand clutched his sleeve as if she already trusted him more than the world that had failed her before. I reached for them ready to follow when bright flashes erupted around us. Cameras, voices. A small group of paparazzi had appeared out of nowhere, barking questions, snapping photos, shouting accusations I could barely process. "Did you set this up?" one of them yelled. "Single mom tries to trap billionaire in staged rescue." Another shouted, "How much is he paying you to hold the kid?" I did not know what was happening. I did not understand why they knew who he was. But I saw the shock tighten Daniel's jaw as he shielded Lila from the cameras, his body curling around her to protect her from the noise. The flashes intensified, and just as I opened my mouth to scream at them to back off, Lila's fingers slipped from Daniel's sleeve. Her eyes rolled back and she collapsed fully against his chest. Daniel did not hesitate. He turned away from the cameras and ran toward his SUV. No questions. No doubts, just action. I chased after him, stumbling through the snow. And as he placed my unconscious daughter inside his warm car, his face lit only by the soft dome light above us. I realized something with a jolt that changed everything. This night was not just cold, it was a threshold. Because the moment Daniel carried Lila in his arms, the storm outside became nothing compared to the one rising around us. The moment Daniel closed the SUV door and the heater roared to life, a wave of warm air washed over us, melting the frost clinging to Lila's hair and my trembling hands. I sat beside her, rubbing her arms gently as color slowly crept back into her cheeks. Daniel slid into the driver's seat but did not start driving immediately. Instead, he turned slightly, giving me the space to focus on my daughter while still making sure we were both safe. His voice was calm, steady in a way that soothed even the panic spiraling inside my chest. "There is a clinic 5 minutes from here. I can take you, or if you prefer, I can call an ambulance. Your choice. No pressure, no assumptions, no intruding questions like, why was your child outside alone? Or where is her father? Or are you sure you are responsible? Just options. Respect. Humanity." I swallowed hard and nodded. "The clinic, please, but thank you for asking." He nodded once as if that answer alone told him everything he needed to know about the kind of woman I was, and he started the car. The snowstorm worsened outside, sheets of white streaking past the windows, but inside that SUV, wrapped in the warmth of the heater and Daniel's quiet presence, it felt like stepping into a different world entirely. Lila stirred weakly, her eyes fluttering open for a moment. She saw Daniel in the front seat, and instead of shrinking back, she reached a hand toward him. He turned slightly, offering his fingers, not his whole hand, a small gesture that told her she could take comfort without being overwhelmed. It was such a small thing, but I felt my breath slip out in a shudder. Most adults did not know how to treat children with trauma. Most tried too hard or backed away too quickly. Daniel simply knew how to be gentle without being intrusive. When we arrived at the clinic, he did not rush to open my door or try to carry Lila like some movie hero. He stepped back, letting me take the lead, letting me be her mother, respecting the boundaries people often ignore when they assume a woman who struggles must want someone else to take over. I lifted Lila into my arms, and the moment her small body settled against me, I felt the tremor of her breath against my collarbone. Daniel opened the door for us, but did not touch either of us. Only once we stepped into the warm waiting room did he move closer, keeping his voice low. "If you need anything, I will be right here." We were the only ones there. A nurse brought blankets and warm juice, and after a brief check, she assured me Lila was not in medical danger. Just mild hypothermia, quick to resolve with heat and rest. Relief hit me so hard that my knees nearly buckled. I sank into a chair beside Lila's bed while she rested under a heated blanket, her cheeks warmer now, her breathing more even. Daniel stood a respectful distance away, hands in his coat pockets, watching us without staring. It struck me that he could have left at any moment. Any other wealthy man probably would have. But he stayed. And he stayed without hovering, without inserting himself, without overstepping. He stayed like someone who understood what loneliness was. After the nurse stepped out, he approached slowly. "May I sit?" he asked. The fact that he asked made my chest tighten. "Yes, please." He lowered himself into the chair beside me. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Outside the window, snowflakes drifted heavily, swirling in chaotic patterns. I watched them, feeling the weight of the day pressing against my ribs. Daniel finally broke the silence. "She must have been terrified." I nodded. "She used to wake up at night calling for her foster mother. She has not done that in months. Tonight, something triggered her." He kept his voice gentle. "And you came home to find her outside alone. That must have been terrifying for you too." I swallowed past the knot in my throat. I am her mother. I should have protected her from ever feeling like she had to go looking for someone else. Daniel shook his head. "Kids do not look for logic. They look for ghosts, even the ones that hurt them." His eyes softened as he spoke, and I realized there was something in his voice, something familiar. Loss, experience, a shadow of his own past. I wanted to ask, but I did not. Not yet. Lila shifted in her sleep, her small hand stretching out as if searching for something. Daniel watched the motion, his expression warm, but unreadable. "She seems like a strong kid." I smiled faintly. "She is, Stronger than she should have to be. Daniel took a slow breath, his gaze still trained on the little girl wrapped in blankets. If you two need a ride home after this, I can help. No expectations, no strings. But the paparazzi, they were there for me, not you. I blinked, confused. You know who I am, right? I shook my head. No. Should I? He let out a slow exhale that was almost a laugh. Probably for the best. I own Crosstech. It is a software and security company. That, combined with a messy public breakup last year, means my face ends up online more often than I like. My stomach dropped. So the accusation's outside? He nodded. People assume any woman near me wants something, and they assume any kid must be a prop. I looked down at Lila, my throat tightening. I would never use her. I know, Daniel said softly. That is why I stepped between you and the cameras. I just did not want her photographed like that. For a moment, the air between us warmed a little more. Not romantic, not dramatic. Just two tired souls recognizing a quiet truth in each other. When the nurse returned with discharge papers, Daniel rose. I will give you a ride home. It is late and the storm is getting worse. Normally, I would have refused. Pride is easy when you are alone. Harder when your child is cold and fragile in your arms. Thank you, I whispered. As we left the clinic, Daniel walked beside us, not in front, not behind, just beside. The way someone walks when they mean no harm. And as the snow swirled around us, something inside me softened just enough for me to admit what I had been denying the entire night. This stranger felt like warmth in a world that had been cold for far too long. The next morning arrived in a shade of pale blue that felt colder than the night before. Daniel had made coffee in his kitchen, the kind that smelled richer than anything I used to buy on sale. Lila sat wrapped in a blanket beside me on the sofa, eating toast slowly, as if every chew reminded her body it was safe now. Daniel kept his distance, leaning against the counter while answering emails, pretending not to watch us, but absolutely watching us. I knew that kind of watching. The careful kind. The protective kind. The kind men do not fake well. Lila had slept more peacefully than she had in months. I should have been relieved. Instead, a strange knot twisted in my stomach because peace never lasted for us. Peace was just the silence before someone kicked down the door, literal or not. Daniel finally closed his laptop and walked over. You two okay with breakfast number 2? He asked, glancing at the plate of toast crumbs. Lila nodded with her whole head crumbs still on her lips. Her voice came tiny. Mommy says we need to eat when we can. I felt my face heat with embarrassment, but Daniel only smiled softly. Not with pity, but with something that felt dangerously close to respect. Then his expression shifted. There is something I need to show you, he said quietly. He picked up the remote. His security cameras flickered onto the TV screen. At exactly 2:32 in the morning, a tall figure walked along his fence line. Slow, confident, like he knew the property, like he knew we were inside. My heartbeat slammed hard against my ribs. Even though the face was shadowed, I recognized the way he carried his shoulders slightly forward, the way he moved like he owned the ground under him, even though he barely owned his own life. Jonah. The whisper slipped out before I could stop it. Daniel's eyes flicked toward me. You know him. I swallowed hard. More than I ever wanted to. Lila's small hand clutched my sleeve. Mommy, who is he? Her voice trembled like a glass about to crack. I pulled her onto my lap and held her tight. Daniel sat across from us, giving space but not leaving. I owed him the truth. I owed Lila the truth more. Jonah was the man who lived with your old foster mom, I said. Lila's face dropped instantly and she pressed her cheek into my chest, hiding from memories she could not fully understand. Her foster mother Carla had once convinced the system she was stable enough to raise a child, but reality was far from stable. I continued slowly choosing every word. Jonah was never supposed to be alone with Lila. Ever. But Carla ignored the rules. She wanted the extra support check. That was the part most people do not understand about the American system. Some people take kids in for love. Others take them in for money. One winter night when I arrived for a surprise visit, I found Lila outside the house wearing only a thin shirt, sitting on the back steps with her knees pulled against her chest. Snow gathered in her hair. She looked like a bird someone had thrown out of the nest. Jonah had locked her outside because she spilled a drink on the carpet. Carla was drunk and passed out. I remember screaming his name so loud my throat bled. I got Lila into my arms before she froze, but her little body shook for hours. I filed reports. I fought. I begged. And I won. The court returned her to me permanently. Carla disappeared overnight. Jonah vanished too, until last week when a letter appeared in my mailbox. No return address. Just 5 words. She belongs with us now. Daniel tensed. Us as in him and Carla. Carla isn't the problem anymore, I whispered. She moved states after losing custody. But Jonah, he leaned on kids for money. I heard rumors he tried taking in another foster kid, but they denied him because of past incidents. He has gambling debt. He owes people who do not knock on the door nicely. And he thinks taking Lila back will be his golden ticket. Daniel's jaw hardened. So he has been watching you. For months, probably. The failed job interviews, the strange cars slowing near our building, the feeling of being followed in the grocery store parking lot, they all suddenly connected like pieces of a puzzle, forming a monster's face. I kept going. Yesterday, someone sent me a message from an unknown number. Bring the girl. No police. Or everyone will know what you really were before you became a mother. I inhaled sharply as the shame stung again. There had been a year after my divorce when I worked 2 restaurant jobs and a bar shift at night. People love to twist a struggling woman's past into something dirty. Daniel leaned forward, voice steady. Whatever you did to survive is not shameful. But this man, Jonah, he added harm into the world. Not you. His calm cut through something in me. It was the closest thing to safety I had heard in years. And then, Lila whispered into my chest, Mommy, is he going to take me? He cannot, I said, pulling her closer. He will not. Daniel spoke with quiet certainty. He is not getting anywhere near this house again, and he will not get near her school or your apartment either. You have my word. Lila lifted her head slowly, her cheeks still damp. Why do you want to help us? She asked him softly. She was not accusing. She was simply a child trying to understand kindness. Daniel met her gaze with a gentleness that did not feel rehearsed. No child should ever wait in the cold alone, he said. That was the moment something shifted. In him. In me. In the room. It felt like the first warm day after a brutal winter. But warmth is dangerous when you have lived most of your life expecting the ground to crack open beneath you. Before I could respond, my phone buzzed on the table. A new notification popped up. A social media post. My face and Lila's face blurred just enough to hide our names, but not enough to hide the implication. Caption, nice upgrade, using your kid to catch a billionaire. Daniel saw it too. His expression changed from concern to something colder and sharper. This is coordinated, he said quietly. Somebody wants you desperate. Somebody wants control. He looked straight at me. We are not letting them have it. My stomach twisted. Because deep down I knew he was right, and the storm that waited outside last night was nothing compared to the storm that was coming. By noon the next day, it felt like the whole world had discovered a story about me that was not mine, a story someone else had written with cruel hands and a sick imagination. It started with a single post, the one Daniel and I saw on his phone, but lies on the internet are like sparks in dry grass. They do not sit still, they race, they burn, they multiply. At 11:35, I was sitting at Daniel's dining table watching Lila draw a picture of us 3 in front of a big house with smoke coming from the chimney. It was her way of imagining stability. Home. Warmth. Maybe even family. Then my phone buzzed. And buzzed again. And again. At first, I ignored it. My nerves were already stretched thin after seeing the shadow of Jonah on the camera footage. My hands were still trembling from it, but when the buzzing wouldn't stop, I flipped the phone over. My name was trending on the local community app, not my full name. Just the woman who trapped the billionaire. The post used the same blurred photo that someone sent Daniel earlier, but now there were arrows pointing to my coat, my shoes, Lila's backpack. Strangers analyzed every detail like detectives hunting a criminal. One comment read, "She planned this. Look at the way she holds the kid forward like bait." Another said, "Classic gold digger move. Kid is probably not even hers." My stomach turned as I read. These people did not know me. They did not know I worked 2 jobs, that I sometimes cut my own meals in half to feed my daughter, that I stood in snowstorms waiting for buses that never came. They did not know how many nights I stayed awake listening for footsteps in the hallway outside our apartment. They did not know that my daughter had stood alone in 10-degree cold because she thought her mother had abandoned her again. They did not care. Internet strangers never do. Daniel walked back into the kitchen with a cup of coffee, saw my face, and froze. "What happened?" I handed him the phone. His jaw tightened, but he breathed slowly through his nose, like a man used to handling storms without letting the storms handle him. "Do not read the comments," he said quietly. "They are not real. They feel real," I whispered. And that was the truth. A lie can become real when enough people believe it. By afternoon, someone had remembered the bar where I used to work years ago. They dug up old photos from customers. Me in an apron wiping down tables. Me carrying a tray. Me looking exhausted after a double shift. The captions twisted it. "CEO falls for former bar girl, kid used as prop." Used as... I felt heat crawl up my neck and settle in my chest. It was not shame for what I had done. Working in a bar is honest work. Surviving is honest work. The shame came from knowing that strangers would turn that struggle into something filthy just because I was standing near a rich man. Lila tugged on my sleeve. "Mommy, why are people saying bad things?" She held out her drawing. The little house was smudged where her fingers had pressed too hard. I forced a smile. "Sometimes people say things that are not true." Her lower lip trembled. "Why do they say them about us?" I did not have an answer that would fit inside a child's heart. Before I could try, there was a knock at the door. Daniel moved quickly, pulling up the camera feed on his phone. "Paparazzi," he muttered. 3 of them. He spoke carefully, like not wanting to frighten Lila. "Let's move to the back door." I felt my pulse spike. Paparazzi did not care about right or wrong any more than strangers online did. They cared about money. They cared about views. They cared about being first. One of them was already pointing a camera toward the windows. I ducked my head, clutching Lila's hand, and followed Daniel through the hallway. He guided us into the mudroom and opened the back entrance, but the moment we stepped outside, another photographer appeared behind the fence. "There she is," he shouted. "The kid, too." Daniel stepped between us instinctively. "Back up," he said, firm but controlled. "You are on private property." The man ignored him, camera flashing, as he tried to circle around. Daniel reached into his pocket, tapped something on his phone, and within seconds, 2 uniformed security guards jogged around the corner. These were not big, muscular bouncers. They looked like regular men in winter coats, polite but trained. One held out his hand. "Sir, this is private property. You need to leave," the photographer argued. Something about freedom of press and public interest. But after a minute, he backed away, cursing under his breath. It did not matter. He had already gotten what he wanted. More photos, more lies, more fuel. By the time we made it into the garage, my phone buzzed again. Daniel didn't let me look at it. "Let me see," he said gently. I handed it over because I had no strength left to fight. He read silently, his brows drawing lower with each line. "They are telling people your boss fired you." My breath hitched. That is not true. I know that he said, but someone is calling your store. A lot. They are flooding Yelp with fake reviews too. My throat tightened. My job was the only steady thing I had. Without it, I would not afford rent, not afford food, not afford safety. And whoever was behind this knew it. Daniel placed his hand on the table beside mine, not touching me, just offering presence. "I will help you," he said quietly. But I shook my head. "I cannot let this ruin your reputation." He leaned forward, his expression steady. "My reputation is not more important than your child's safety." I swallowed hard. Then the next message arrived. A new number, no words, just a video. I tapped it with trembling fingers. It showed me and Lila walking into Daniel's house the night before. Then the camera zoomed on me, on my face, on my coat, on my daughter's small body leaning into me. The caption appeared last. Bring the girl, or I show more. My blood ran cold. Daniel saw my reaction and lowered his voice. This is Jonah. The internet was just the bait. The lies were the net. And I was caught. I woke the next morning to the smell of something warm drifting from the kitchen, a soft, buttery scent curling through the hallway like a whisper of safety. For a moment, I forgot the chaos of yesterday, the internet feeding frenzy the message Jonah sent. For a moment, I allowed myself to pretend life was ordinary. Then Lila rustled beside me, her small hand reaching to find mine, even in her sleep, and reality settled like winter fog in my chest. I slid out of bed quietly, tucking the blanket around her shoulders, and stepped into the hallway. Daniel was in the kitchen, sleeves pushed up, whisking something in a bowl with a focus that looked almost tender. He did not hear me at first. He was humming under his breath, something soft and low, the kind of tune a man might hum when he is trying to steady his thoughts. When he noticed me, he did not jump or hide what he was doing. He just smiled in that gentle way he did when he did not want to startle me. Good morning, he said. I tried making blueberry pancakes, but I think I burned the first few. I glanced at the garbage can. 3 dark, tragic circles of charcoal sat inside. It made something in me loosen just a little. You do not have to cook for us, I said. I can help. I do not mind. He set the whisk down. I know you do not need my help, but I like doing things that make the house feel warmer. I did not answer. Warmth was something I had learned not to trust too easily. After years of fighting for Lila's safety, kindness always felt like a trick, a step toward disappointment. Still, the kitchen felt different this morning. Softer, less like a stranger's home, more like a place where breath could settle. When Lila woke, she slid into Daniel's kitchen like she had been doing it her whole life. She sat at the island and swung her legs under the stool. Her hair was tangled, her eyes still puffy from yesterday's fear, but when Daniel placed a plate of lopsided pancakes in front of her, something bright lit up her face. Are these for me? Daniel nodded. The entire batch, even the burnt ones if you want them. She laughed a real laugh, small but unbroken. It struck me harder than anything else. Kids do not laugh like that when they are scared. They do not laugh like that unless they feel safe. I watched her eat, watched her glance between the two of us as if studying some new shape forming in the air. Then she said it. Do you think we can stay here forever? Her voice was small, hopeful, unaware of the way her question made my throat close. Daniel's hands froze for a second. He did not look at me first. He looked at her. You are safe here, he said softly. That is what matters. She nodded, accepting that answer like it was enough. I wished it were enough for my heart, too. Later, I washed dishes while Daniel shoveled the walkway outside. Snowflakes drifted down slowly, the kind of light snow that makes the world feel quiet. Through the window, I could see him working carefully, scraping each step, spreading salt like he had done it 1,000 times. He paused, once glanced at the window, and gave a small wave when he saw me watching. I felt heat rise to my cheeks and quickly turned away. This was dangerous. Not because Daniel was dangerous, but because he was steady. Steady was the most dangerous thing in the world for someone like me. Steady made you trust. Steady made you hope. Around noon, the storm picked up again, wind sweeping across the yard. Daniel offered Lila hot chocolate and turned on a movie for her in the living room. She curled into the blanket he brought her, sipping from the mug with both hands. Her eyes drifted toward him again and again. Kids can sense safety before adults will admit it. I sat on the edge of the couch trying not to intrude, but Lila patted the cushion beside her. Mommy, sit with us. Us! A word that felt unfamiliar and familiar at the same time. So I sat. Daniel kept a respectful distance, just one cushion between us, but I could feel the nearness of him like warmth radiating from a steady flame. Outside, the wind rattled the windows. Inside, Lila rested her head on my shoulder, then slid closer until her legs were draped across both of our thighs. It was accidental at first, then intentional. My breath caught. Daniel looked over, unsure if he should move, unsure if the moment belonged to him. Then Lila sighed contently and whispered, "I like when we are all together." I could not speak. My voice would have broken. Daniel finally said softly, "Me too." The room grew quiet, filled with nothing but the sound of the movie and the occasional gust of wind. It should have scared me. Attachment had always led to loss. But watching Lila's chest rise and fall softly as she drifted to sleep between us, I felt something shift, slow and fragile, like ice beginning to crack in early spring. Daniel whispered, "You're not alone in this." Not anymore. I stared at him, at the sincerity in his face, at the exhaustion he tried to hide, at the quiet strength in the way he sat with us like he belonged there too. I opened my mouth to speak, but froze when I caught something outside the window. Footprints. Fresh ones. They cut across the yard into the tree line, too big to be Daniel's, too deep to be a delivery driver, too recent to be old. My skin prickled cold rising through my veins. Those were not there an hour ago. Daniel followed my gaze. His face hardened. "Stay inside," he said quietly. "Lock the doors." My heart hammered, the warmth shattered, safety cracked, because someone had been here, watching, waiting, and I knew exactly who. The moment I saw those footprints cutting through the fresh snow, something inside me went cold in a way the winter wind never could. They were too heavy, too deliberate, sinking deep like someone had stood there for a while, watching, studying, waiting. Daniel moved quickly, grabbing his coat and stepping toward the back door. I reached for his arm without thinking, fingers curling around his sleeve. "Be careful." He paused, met my eyes, nodded once, then stepped outside. I locked the door behind him, every nerve in my body buzzing. Lila slept on the couch, her little chest rising steadily under the warm blanket. I watched her face, the tiny flutter of her eyelashes, the peace she carried so easily at 7 years old, not knowing chaos waited beyond every moment of safety. I could not lose this. I could not let Jonah take her again. The wind pushed against the house in slow, heavy breaths. I watched Daniel move across the yard through the window snow swirling around him. He crouched near the tracks, examining them with a focus that made my stomach twist. He followed them a few feet before they disappeared into the woods, swallowed by drifting snow. Then he stopped, turned, and walked back faster than he had gone out. When he came in, he stomped the snow from his boots but did not remove his coat. "We need to check the cameras," he said. His voice was tight, not angry, but controlled in that way men get when adrenaline spikes, fear in a measured tone. He led me to the small office off the hall, where a monitor displayed the security feeds. He clicked through each window until he reached the footage from the backyard. And there it was. At 2:06 in the morning, a tall figure stepped into view, half swallowed by the darkness. He wore a hooded jacket and moved slowly along the fence line, pausing twice as if searching for something. No flashlight, no phone light. He knew how not to be seen. The camera caught only glimpses of his profile, the faint edge of a cheekbone, the slope of shoulders I had seen before in doorways I never wanted to remember. My breath hitched. It was him. The room felt smaller. My skin prickled like ice needles. Daniel looked at me, waiting for confirmation I did not want to give. "It is Jonah," I whispered. My voice trembled, but I kept speaking. "I know that walk. I know that jacket. He used to stand like that when he watched us in the backyard of the foster house." Daniel's eyes darkened. He did not speak immediately. He replayed the footage again, zoomed in, then leaned back in his chair with a slow exhale. "He is testing boundaries," Daniel said, "seeing how close he can get without being caught. This is not random. He came here for you and Lila." My throat tightened. Jonah was not someone who stopped once he started. He would push until something broke. And he always made sure it was not him. I pulled my arms around myself, suddenly cold. "He has been messaging me for weeks," I said quietly, "threatening to take her, saying she belongs with them with that life." Daniel closed his eyes for a moment, not in frustration, but in sorrow. "You should have told me," he said softly, not accusing. Just the truth. I looked down at my hands. I did not want to be a burden. I did not want you to think I came into your life with a storm behind me. He shook his head sharply. You did not bring the storm. Someone else did, and storms can be dealt with. His certainty steadied something inside me for a moment. Then a ping from my phone shattered it. I looked down. Video attachment from an unknown number. My heart pounded as I opened it. Lila, at 4 years old, in pajamas, outside, snow falling heavily around her. Her little hands curled into fists as she stood on the back porch of the foster house crying silently. The door behind her locked, her breath fogged in the air. Tears streaked her face. Footage recorded from behind a fence. Jonah whispering to the camera almost lovingly. Look, she chooses me. She always comes to me. I dropped the phone. Daniel picked it up, jaw-clenching with a violence he did not let reach his voice. This is proof of neglect, proof of endangerment, proof that he should never be near her again. I could not breathe for a moment. I had never seen that video. I had never known she was outside alone that night. I had been working a late shift. Her foster mother told me she had slept early. Rage twisted through me, sharp enough to taste. I had spent years trying to protect Lila from what I knew happened. Now I was being confronted with what I did not know. Daniel knelt in front of me, lowering himself so he could look at me straight on. He spoke slowly, deliberately, each word a weight. You are not alone in this. Not anymore. He stood, grabbed his phone, and called someone I did not know. A friend of mine, he said. A former federal investigator. He will help us file an emergency restraining request backed with evidence. We will get Lila protected. You will not go through this by yourself. I stared at him, unable to speak because no one had ever said that to me. Not a social worker. Not the court. Not the foster system. Not even the man I once thought I loved. And then, from the living room, Lila stirred. Mommy, she called softly. I rushed to her side. She blinked up at me, sleepy and confused. Why are you crying? I swallowed the fear and held her tightly. Just happy you are safe, baby. She tucked her head into my chest. The storm outside howled against the window, but inside something else was rising. Not safety, not yet, but the beginning of a fight. One I was finally not fighting alone. The next 48 hours passed in a blur of fear paperwork and the kind of exhaustion that settles deep enough to make your bones ache. Daniel worked non-stop coordinating with his investigator friend, filing emergency petitions, organizing digital evidence, and installing 2 new security cameras. I tried to hold myself together for Lila, but inside my chest something trembled like a wire pulled too tight. The winter storm only worsened. Snow came down in thick, relentless sheets, burying the driveway and piling against the windows. Yet somehow Daniel seemed calmer the more chaotic things became. He moved with a sure purpose, a kind of quiet command I had never witnessed in anyone. Men like Jonah puffed up their chests and called it strength. Daniel simply was strength. By the 3rd morning, the house hummed with a tense quiet. Lila ate breakfast slowly, her eyes drifting toward the windows every few minutes. She was trying to be brave, trying to pretend she wasn't scared. I sat beside her, brushing her hair back gently. We are safe here, I told her. She nodded but didn't quite believe it. Kids always feel the things adults try to hide. Daniel stepped in with his coffee, glancing at the security tablet on the counter. His eyes narrowed. Something's wrong, he murmured. He walked to the window, staring up toward the sky. I followed his gaze. At first, all I heard was wind. Then it shifted, a low rumble, a mechanical chop cutting through the storm. Lila's spoon froze mid-air. Mommy, what is that? The rumble grew louder. Then the air above the house shook. Helicopters, at least 2 of them. Their searchlights cut through the gray sky, sweeping across the farm like giant white blades. I stumbled back from the window. What is happening? Daniel didn't answer at first. He stepped toward the door, grabbed his coat, and signaled me to stay put. Let me check. Stay with Lila. The lights grew stronger. One beam landed directly on our backyard, flooding the snow in harsh white. Lila whimpered and clung to me. I held her tight heart pounding as the helicopter circled lower. Daniel opened the door, the wind slamming it back against the wall. Snow blasted into the hallway. He stepped outside, phone to his ear. Moments later, he ran back in, face pale but determined. Someone tipped off the press. They think Jonah is here on the property. My stomach dropped. What? Why? Daniel exhaled tightly. Because the rumor online is that you are hiding him here. The shock hit me so hard, my knees buckled. Me, hiding Jonah. The man who terrorized us. Lila's voice cracked in fear. Mommy, are they going to take me away? I squeezed her tighter. No, never. You are staying with me. The helicopter lights flashed again brighter. A loudspeaker crackled. Sheriff's Department, step outside. Daniel stormed to the door. This is absurd. They cannot do this without a warrant. But another voice shouted over the wind. Mr. Cross, we have reason to believe a dangerous individual may be on your property. Please cooperate. Daniel cursed under his breath, grabbed his gloves, and went out into the blinding snow. I watched through the window as deputies rushed toward him, scanning the area with flashlights. Helicopter blades roared overhead. The storm made everything look frantic, distorted. I held Lila, whispering that everything was going to be okay, even though my voice shook. After several tense minutes, Daniel came back inside with 2 officers. Ma'am, one said, are you aware of any trespassers or individuals who may be a threat to you or your child? I stared at him, stunned. Yes. Jonah, the man harassing us. The one who has been stalking the property. The officer exchanged a look with the other one. Then he spoke carefully. We received an anonymous tip that you and Mr. Cross are hiding him. I almost laughed. It burst out of me, hysterical and painful. Hiding him. Do you think I would hide the man who abused my daughter, who keeps threatening to take her? The officers looked uncomfortable now. Daniel moved beside me, placing a steady hand on my back. She is the victim here, and my security footage will prove Jonah came onto this property uninvited 2 nights ago. The men nodded, apologizing as they stepped back out into the storm to review the footage. When the door closed, I leaned into the wall, shaking. Lila climbed into my lap, trembling silently. Daniel crouched beside us. Are you hurt? I shook my head, just exhausted and scared. He touched my shoulder gently. This is how men like Jonah operate. Chaos, confusion, lies. But he has already stepped too far. He will be caught. I wanted to believe him, truly. But the roar of the helicopters above us, the searchlights, the fear in Lila's eyes made everything feel too big, too heavy. Suddenly my phone buzzed, a message from an unknown number. I felt the blood drain from my face. Daniel saw it instantly. What is it? I turned the screen so he could see. A photo of me taken through the window. Me holding Lila. The caption read, "Still think he can protect you." Daniel's expression hardened into something cold and terrifying. He grabbed his phone again, calling the investigator. Put out an immediate APB on Jonah. He is escalating. He is getting bold. He is close. The minutes crawled by painfully as the officers reviewed the footage outside. Finally, the helicopters lifted their lights, sweeping away into the distance. Silence fell again. Heavy. Suffocating. The sheriff approached Daniel at the door. We believe you. Jonah was here, and we will find him. Daniel shut the door locked. It turned to me and Lila. His jaw was set. His eyes were steady. We will protect each other. No more running. I looked at him, then at Lila, who clung to my shirt. For the first time in my life, the fear did not drown me. It sharpened me. And deep inside the storm, something solid formed. I was done being afraid. The house remained painfully quiet after the helicopters left, the kind of quiet that feels like something is listening, waiting. I sat at the kitchen table with Lila curled in my lap, her small fingers clutching the fabric of my sweater as though letting go would send me drifting away. Daniel locked every door, twice checked the windows, inspected the security feeds again, then finally sat across from me. He looked exhausted, but more than that, he looked resolute. We cannot wait another day, he said. We go on offense now. I swallowed hard. Offense. It sounded so foreign to me. I had spent years learning how to survive, how to disappear, how to keep my head down and protect Lila by being small. Offensive was something abusers were, not mothers like me. But Daniel leaned forward, his voice gentler. You and Lila deserve peace. That means building a case strong enough that Jonah cannot wiggle out of it, and I know exactly who we need. The next morning, once the roads were plowed, he drove us into the city. Lila sat in the back seat, bundled in her puffy coat, holding her stuffed fox. She looked tired, her eyes shadowed from too many days of fear, but she stayed quiet. Snow still coated the buildings gray and heavy along the sidewalks. Daniel parked in front of a tall brick building with polished glass doors. Law offices. He opened the door for us, but before we stepped inside, he crouched beside Lila. Sweetheart, there might be some serious grown-up conversations today. You can stay with the receptionist if you want. Lila glanced at me and shook her head quickly. No, I want to stay with Mommy. My throat tightened. Daniel nodded. Then stay right with her, okay? Inside, warm lights glowed against dark wood. A woman in her 40s stepped out from her office when she noticed Daniel. Her expression softened immediately. Daniel, did he escalate? Daniel nodded and gestured to me. Grace, this is Ava, and this is her daughter Lila. She gave us that kind of empathetic look that only comes from someone who has seen too many cases like ours. Come in, she said. Let's get everything on the record. We sat in her office, Lila perched on my lap. I told Grace everything, every threat, every message, every time Jonah had appeared or hinted he was watching. Grace typed constantly, her jaw tightening with each detail. When I finished, she spoke with a calm certainty that felt like a rope thrown to someone drowning. You have more evidence than most domestic harassment victims ever managed to collect. Between the texts, the video he sent the prior incident reports, and the footage of him on Daniel's property, we have enough to file an immediate protective injunction and forward charges to the district attorney. The words almost knocked the air from my lungs. Charges. Real ones. Ones that might actually stick. Daniel leaned forward. What about the fake rumors online, the false reports, the tip that sent helicopters to my home? Grace nodded slowly. Those two. It is illegal to weaponize law enforcement through false reports. We will include everything. I felt Lila shift against me, and when I looked down, she was watching Grace with wide eyes. Will he stop? She whispered. Grace softened. We are going to make sure he does, sweetheart. Daniel placed a comforting hand on the back of my chair. We are not going to let him hurt you again. Not you or your mother. Something warm and fragile rose in my chest. Trust. Real trust. When the paperwork was done, Grace handed us a printed packet. I will file these today. You should hear from the DA within 48 hours. But Ava, she added, looking directly at me, you need to be prepared. Men like Jonah do not go quietly. They get louder, sloppier, more desperate once they know they are losing control. A chill ran down my spine. Daniel wrapped an arm around my shoulder and guided us out. On the drive home, snow drifted softly across the windshield, quiet and slow. Lila eventually fell asleep. Daniel kept his eyes on the road, but his voice was steady. No more secrets. If anything happens, anything at all, you tell me first. I hesitated. I had spent years believing that telling someone made things worse. But looking at him, I felt the truth settle inside me. Okay, I whispered. I will. When we pulled into the driveway, something caught my eye. A dark shape near the porch. Daniel braked immediately. Stay here. He got out cautiously, the crunch of his boots sharp in the frozen air. I watched him approach the porch. He bent down, picked something up. He turned and held it up for me to see. A knife, large, serrated, stabbed into the wooden railing. My breath locked in my chest. He pulled it out, checked the porch camera, and strode back quickly. The video feed showed nothing but wind. Whoever left it had known the blind spots. Daniel's jaw worked tightly. He is taunting us, trying to scare you. My voice trembled. It is working. Daniel put the knife in a bag and sealed it. Evidence. I will send this to Grace and the investigator. Then he looked at me, really looked at me. You are not alone. You have me. You have people who believe you, who will fight for you. My eyes burned because no one ever had. Not like this. And then my phone buzzed. A new message. I forced myself to look. A photo. Me walking into the law office that morning. The caption, "Running to your rich boyfriend won't save you." Daniel read it over my shoulder. His voice dropped to a low, dangerous calm. Then we go all in. We build a case so strong he can never come near you again. He paused, and we do it together. I nodded, but fear curled deep in my stomach. Because for the first time, Jonah knew we were fighting back. And men like him did not back down. They burned the world before they let go. The house felt different after the knife was found on the porch, like every wall had absorbed the tension in the air. Even the heat hummed too loudly, the floorboards seemed to creak with caution. Lila stayed close to me all evening, holding my hand tighter than usual, her eyes watching every shadow. Daniel cooked dinner for the three of us, but he barely spoke. He kept checking the windows, checking the cameras, checking his phone for updates from Grace or the investigator. By the time we sat down at the table, my stomach was twisted so tight I could barely swallow a bite. Lila pushed her peas around her plate and whispered, "Mommy, did he come here?" I forced a smile for her sake. We are safe inside. Daniel made sure. She nodded slowly, trusting me because she always had. But when she got up to wash her hands, leaving the room briefly, Daniel finally spoke. "Why did you not tell me about meeting Jonah the first time?" His voice was low, steady, but wounded, and I felt that sound more sharply than any shouted accusation. I stared at my hands. I did not want to pull you into it. I did not want you to think I was creating drama. I did not want to seem like I was using you. He exhaled sharply and dragged a hand through his hair. "Ava, you were being threatened. You were alone. You were scared. Why would you think you needed to hide that from me?" I fumbled for words, because every time in my life I reached for help, people walked away, or judged me, or decided I was too much trouble. I could barely hold his gaze. I was terrified that if you knew everything, you would think I was a burden, that I did not deserve the safety you gave us. His jaw tightened with something like hurt and frustration dissolving together. "Ava, I am not everyone else," but his tone was different, softer but distant, like he was standing on the other side of a closing door. When Lila came back and sat beside me, Daniel fell silent again. Dinner finished quietly, too quietly. Afterward, Lila curled up on the couch with her stuffed fox and fell asleep within minutes, exhaustion pulling her under. I lifted her gently and carried her upstairs, tucked her in, smoothed her hair, watched her breathe the slow, rhythmic breaths of a child finally resting. When I returned downstairs, Daniel stood by the window, hands in his pockets, watching the snow falling steadily outside. The lamplight cast a soft golden halo around him, but his shoulders were tense. I said his name barely above a whisper. He did not turn around right away. When he finally did, his eyes were soft but tired. "Ava, I need to know something. If that envelope of money you gave Jonah had not been exposed, would you have told me?" The question slid between us like a knife. My throat tightened. I wanted to. I said it quietly. I really did. But you would not have, he said gently, because you thought it would make you unworthy, and that is what hurts the most. I closed my eyes because the truth of it was unbearable. He let out a slow breath and looked at the floor. "I care about you, both of you, more than I expected, more than I planned, but it is hard knowing you were carrying all that alone when I was right here." I stepped closer. "Daniel, I have lived my whole life waiting for the other shoe to drop. I learned to keep my problems small, to hide things to avoid making waves. I did not mean to shut you out. I was trying to protect the one good thing we had." He looked up, emotion flickering in his eyes. "And in doing so, you broke something." My heart stuttered. I felt tears rising. "Daniel, I am trying. I really am." He nodded but looked away again. "I know. I just need time. Time." It felt like the coldest word I had ever heard. That night, he slept in the guest room. I stared at the ceiling for hours, replaying everything. Every mistake, every fear, every moment I should have asked for help but did not. My chest ached with an emptiness I could not soothe. Down the hall, I heard him pacing at one point, restless too, but neither of us moved toward the other. The next morning, Lila woke early and padded into my room with sleepy eyes. "Mommy, is Daniel mad?" My heart cracked. "No, honey. Adults just need space sometimes." But she frowned, looking at the empty side of my bed. "He is not eating breakfast with us." I bit my lip. "He is just thinking." That seemed to trouble her even more. "Did we lose him too?" The fear in her voice cut straight through me. I pulled her into my arms and kissed her hair. "No, baby, no." But I did not fully believe it myself. Downstairs, the house felt hollow again. Daniel had left early for work. No note, no message, just absence. And the absence felt like its own kind of storm. The silence stretched across the next few days, not angry, not cold, just aching. We spoke politely, carefully, too carefully. Lila sensed everything. Her laughter faded. She hovered near us constantly, as though trying to hold us together. One evening, she watched us from the doorway while we washed dishes. Her eyes were shiny, uncertain. She finally spoke in a trembling voice. "I thought we were a family." My hand froze mid-rinse. Daniel's shoulders tensed. Lila's lower lip quivered. "I do not want to lose Daniel, or you, or this house. Are we breaking?" Daniel set the plate down. He dried his hands slowly and knelt in front of her. "No, sweetheart. You are not losing anyone. Adults sometimes struggle. But we are not going anywhere." She nodded, wiping her cheeks with her sleeves, and Daniel gently wrapped his arms around her. I stood behind them, tears filling my eyes. I realized then that whatever had cracked between me and Daniel, whatever fear had pulled me into silence, whatever wound had reopened inside both of us, we still had something worth fighting for. But healing would take more than promises. It would take truth, all of it, even the parts that terrified me. And the next cliffhanger was already on its way. Because that night the investigator called, and he had found something that would change everything. The call came just after 9 that night, when the house was quiet and Lila was asleep with her stuffed fox tucked under her chin. Daniel was in his study, the door cracked halfway, the soft glow of his desk lamp spilling into the hallway. I stood in the kitchen rinsing a mug that I was not even using anymore when my phone vibrated on the countertop. Unknown number. But something in my chest tightened because I knew exactly who it was. When I answered, the investigator's voice came through crisp and urgent. "Ava, I found something. You both need to hear this." My pulse kicked hard. I told him to hold on while I went to get Daniel. For a moment, I hesitated outside the study, hand hovering near the door frame. Things between us were still fragile, still tense. But the weight of what the investigator found pressed me forward. I knocked lightly. Daniel looked up immediately, tired eyes softening just a little when he saw my worry. "It is him," I whispered. "The investigator. He says we need to hear something together." Daniel rose from his chair without another word and followed me back to the kitchen. I put the phone on speaker and set it on the counter. The investigator cleared his throat. "I will get to the point." The video of Ava giving the envelope to Jonah was edited. Badly, but convincing enough to fool anyone who did not know better. Daniel's posture stiffened. I felt my breath catch. "Edited how?" The investigator continued. "The original footage had audio. Full audio. You were confronting him, Ava. Telling him to leave you alone. Telling him to stay away from your daughter." Jonah removed the sound and cropped the video, then sent it to Daniel with the intent to destroy your relationship and your credibility. Cold spread through my body. I had suspected manipulation, but hearing it confirmed made my legs feel unsteady. Daniel exhaled slowly, shoulders lowering. The investigator was not done. "That is not all. We pulled metadata from Jonah's phone. It led us to a storage account linked to a secondary email. In that drive, we found threads of conversations between Jonah and someone else." Daniel stiffened again. "Who?" The investigator paused almost regretfully. "Your daughter's former foster mother." My heart stopped. The room tilted slightly. For a moment, I forgot how to inhale. Daniel whispered, "Jesus." The investigator continued. "She has been in contact with Jonah for months. He pressured her to stay quiet and threatened her any time she considered reaching out to social services. They planned to use the old video of Lila outside in the cold as leverage, planned to argue you were unfit, planned to claim you stole Lila from a stable home. They were building a case to take your daughter." A deep ringing filled my ears. I grabbed the counter to steady myself because I felt my knees threatening to buckle. Daniel stepped closer. He did not touch me at first, but his presence was suddenly anchoring. The investigator spoke again. "The police have filed an active warrant for Jonah. They are picking up the foster mother for questioning. We expect this to move quickly." I felt a violent rush of relief and fear mix in my bloodstream. "Thank you," I managed to say, though my voice trembled. When I hung up, silence pressed thickly between us. Daniel exhaled and leaned both hands against the counter. His head lowered, his breath uneven. I stood beside him trying to find my words. He spoke first. "I am sorry." My throat tightened immediately. Daniel shook his head slowly, eyes glistening with something raw. "I should have believed you. I should have trusted you instead of letting my fear get loud. I should have asked instead of assuming the worst. You were terrified and I made it worse." I felt something inside me crack open in a different way this time. Not from pain, from relief, from recognition. I stepped closer. "I have not exactly made trusting easy. I kept things from you. I shut down. I pushed you away without trying to." Daniel straightened, turning to face me fully. "Ava, what happened to you before I met you taught you to survive, not to lean on anyone. I should have known that." His voice softened. "I just did not realize how much it hurt you to carry everything alone." My lips trembled. "I did not want you to see me as broken, or as baggage." He shook his head firmly. "You are not broken. And you are not baggage. You are a mother protecting her child. You are a woman who has fought far too many battles alone. And none of that makes you less. It makes you extraordinary." I tried to swallow, but the emotion stuck in my throat. Daniel's eyes lowered, his voice quiet. "When I saw that edited video, something inside me cracked. Not because I thought you were doing something wrong, but because it meant you were afraid to come to me. Afraid that I could not handle your past. Afraid I would walk away." I put a hand on his chest, feeling the steady rise and fall beneath my palm. "I am afraid of losing good things." Daniel caught my hand and held it there. "You will not lose this. Not me, not us, not Lila's safety. We are in this together now." The words soaked into me like heat thawing ice. For the first time in what felt like weeks, I took a deep breath without shaking. He reached out and brushed a tear from my cheek gently. Then he kissed my forehead, soft and deliberate. When we pulled apart, something had shifted between us. A fracture healing, a tension, loosening, a bond strengthening in places that had nearly splintered. Upstairs, a floorboard creaked. It was Lila. She shuffled down the stairs in her pajama pants, rubbing her eyes. "Mommy, Daniel, are we okay now?" Daniel crouched down and opened his arms. "Yeah, sweetheart, we are okay." She ran into him and hugged him tightly. He lifted her up effortlessly. No monsters, no Jonah, no lies. Just us. My eyes stung. As Daniel carried her upstairs, she rested her head on his shoulder and whispered, "Can we keep him?" I laughed through a tear. Daniel glanced back at me, eyes warm, gentle, steady in a way that made my chest ache. "You already have." Later that night, after Lila fell asleep again, I and Daniel sat on the couch close enough to touch, but not speaking at first. The snow outside fell in slow, drifting sheets. Finally, he said, "Tomorrow we tell the police everything, together, and we start building a case to protect Lila for good." I nodded. Together. The word felt right, solid, safe, and we did not know it yet, but the biggest revelation was still waiting for us. Because the next morning, the investigator called again with news that made everything fall into place. The courthouse felt colder than the winter outside, the kind of cold that settled into your bones and made every breath feel heavier. I stood at the entrance with Lila's small hand wrapped tightly in mine, while Daniel waited just one step behind us, a steady presence I leaned on without leaning at all. Reporters gathered near the barricades, their cameras clicking like insects in the wind, but this time their attention wasn't on rumors or headlines about the gold-digging single mom. This time it was about the charges: extortion, child endangerment, digital tampering, conspiracy. The weight of the words alone sent ripples through the town. When we stepped inside, Daniel placed a gentle hand on my back. "You do not have to be afraid," he whispered. "We have truth on our side." I nodded, but fear still pulsed quietly in my chest. I wasn't afraid of losing the case. I was afraid of Lila seeing any part of her past dragged into the open. A court officer escorted us to the waiting area. Lila curled beside me, clutching her stuffed fox. Daniel leaned forward, elbows on his knees, watching the hallway with the protective focus of someone who had already decided he would burn the whole courthouse down if anyone threatened us. When they finally led Jonah in shackled shoulders, hunched still, wearing that smirk that had haunted me for years, something inside me tightened. He looked smaller than I remembered, less powerful, but the danger he represented clung to him like smoke. The judge called the courtroom to order, and everything moved fast. The prosecutor began with a calm but devastating summary of the case. Jonah's history of coercion, his partnership with my former foster mother, the threats, the videos, the manipulated audio, the attempt to regain custody of a child who had already been removed from that home for neglect. The audience murmured. Even the judge's brows rose slightly. Daniel reached over and gently took my hand beneath the table. I let him. Evidence came next. The first clip was the video Jonah sent to Daniel, the one showing me handing over the envelope. When they played the second version, the full version with audio, my voice filled the room. "Leave us alone. Stay away from my daughter. Do not come near us again." The difference was night and day. When it ended, there was silence. Heavy, thick, electric. The prosecutor moved to the next piece of evidence. The messages, dozens of them, some threatening to take Lila, some mocking my past, some implying violence. Then came the metadata trail, the storage account linked to Jonah, the conversation transcripts with the foster mother, the scheme spelled out in terrifying clarity, and then they brought her in, the foster mother. She looked smaller than I remembered, too older, tired, shaking when she sat down. She didn't look at me. Not once. When asked to testify, her voice quivered. Jonah threatened me. He said if I didn't help him, he would tell social services that I neglected the children. He said he would send videos of our worst nights. He said I owed him. She broke down completely. I couldn't breathe. I had spent so long hating her for abandoning Lila that it took me a moment to register the reality. She had been trapped. Not innocent. Never innocent, but trapped. Daniel tensed beside me, jaw tight, protective fury simmering beneath his calm exterior. The judge called for recess after her testimony. When we stepped into the hallway, Daniel placed both hands on my shoulders. "You are doing incredibly well." His voice was soft grounding. Lila tugged my sleeve. "Mommy, is the bad man going to take me away again?" I crouched until I met her eyes. "Never again, baby. I promise." She nodded, small but brave, and wrapped her arms around my neck. When court resumed, it was my turn. My legs felt heavy as I walked to the stand, but each step grew steadier. I raised my right hand, swore the oath, and sat down. The prosecutor asked simple questions first. My name, my relationship to Lila, then the deeper ones. The nights Lila spent outside in the cold, the battles I fought to get custody back, the disappearance, the threats, the fear that never really went away. And then I said the line that came from somewhere deeper than memory. I am not fighting for myself. I am fighting so my daughter never feels alone in the cold again. It echoed in the courtroom. Even the judge paused before continuing. Jonah's attorney tried to discredit me, but each attempt collapsed under the weight of evidence. "Why did you give him money?" I answered plainly. I was terrified. I thought I could end it without dragging anyone else into the dark. And then Daniel stood. Calm. Controlled. Devastating. He testified not as a CEO, but as the man who found my daughter freezing in the snow, who saw her fear with his own eyes, who witnessed the manipulation firsthand. At one point, Jonah lunged forward, shouting something unintelligible, but officers restrained him quickly. His mask slipped. The smirk was gone. All that remained was a man cornered by truth. When closing statements ended, the jury left to deliberate. It took them less than an hour. Guilty on all counts. When the verdict was read, my hands shook violently. Not from fear, from release. From the sudden, overwhelming realization that the nightmare truly was ending. Jonah was taken away, shouting over his shoulder, but the door shut behind him with a final thud that felt like the closing of a long and terrible chapter. Then Lila ran to Daniel and wrapped her arms around his waist. "Daddy, can we go home now?" My breath caught. Daniel froze just one heartbeat as if absorbing the word. "Daddy." Then he knelt and swept her into his arms, holding her tight. "Yes, sweetheart. We can go home." He looked at me over her shoulder. "And you come with us. Always." Tears blurred my vision. For the first time in a very long time, I felt safe. Really safe. The kind of safety that didn't need locks or alarms or court orders. The kind built by love. And just like that, we stepped out of the courthouse into the sunlight, not as people surviving a storm, but as a family walking towards something finally, blessedly warm. The morning light spilled softly across the lakeside porch, draping the wooden steps in a warm, golden glow that felt like the first true sunrise of my life. A year had passed since the courthouse doors closed behind Jonah, and in that time our world reshaped itself piece by piece, not through miracles, but through small, gentle choices that built something stronger than anything I had ever known. The day began like most mornings now, with the soft rustle of curtains and the muffled thump of little feet racing across the hallway. Lila burst into our room with her wild curls bouncing, announcing to the world that breakfast was ready, even though she had only managed to pour cereal into 2 bowls and spill half the milk on the counter. Daniel stretched beside me with a sleepy laugh before rolling out of bed and scooping her into his arms while she squealed with delight. I watched them for a moment longer, letting the image settle in my heart the way sunlight warms cold skin. A year ago, I wasn't sure if Daniel and I would survive the storm that nearly tore us apart. But we did. Not because we were strong all the time, but because we kept choosing each other even when fear made everything feel fragile. Now, our home reflected that choice. The kitchen smelled like cinnamon and vanilla most mornings. The porch held a small wooden bench Daniel built for Lila, where she sat to wait for the school bus. The living room shelves were cluttered with drawings, tiny shoes, books with folded corners, and little pieces of a life that felt too precious to put away. And today was special, though Lila didn't know it yet. Today, Daniel and I would finally tell her what she had unknowingly asked for months ago. Forever. After breakfast, Daniel walked Lila to the garden where the first spring blooms were beginning to open. I stayed behind, wiping down the counter and breathing in the stillness. My hand drifted to my stomach, resting over the gentle curve of a life that fluttered softly under my palm. A new heartbeat. A new beginning. When Daniel returned, he kissed my forehead before kneeling down to kiss the growing bump. His voice warmed the air like sunlight. "I cannot wait to meet our little one." I smiled, placing my hand over his. "Me neither." We spent the morning preparing for a small family picnic by the lake. Daniel packed sandwiches and fruit, while I helped Lila choose her dress, a pale yellow one covered in tiny embroidered daisies. She twirled in it, the hem spinning out as she giggled. "Mommy, I look like sunshine!" "Yes, baby, you are sunshine." At the lake, the world felt suspended in gentle quiet. The water glimmered under the late morning sky, and the breeze carried the scent of pine and fresh earth. Lila chased ducks along the shoreline, while Daniel and I watched from a blanket spread across the grass. He brushed a strand of hair behind my ear. "Are you ready?" I took a slow breath. Yes. When Lila ran back breathless and rosy-cheeked, Daniel lifted her onto his lap and wrapped his arms around her. "There is something we want to ask you, honey." Her eyes widened the way they always did when she sensed something important. "What is it?" I reached over and held her small hands in mine. "Remember when you asked if we were a team forever?" She nodded. I swallowed past the warmth rising in my throat. What would you think about making it official? About becoming our daughter in every way the law can say and in every way love already has. Lila blinked. Once, twice, then her lip trembled. You mean adopted? Daniel nodded gently. If you want that. Her answer came out in a burst of breathless joy. Yes, please, yes. She threw her arms around us both, burying her face in Daniel's shirt before turning and pressing her cheek to my shoulder. I want to be yours forever. The weight of her words settled into my heart with a tenderness so deep it almost hurt. She was choosing us, too. We spent the afternoon celebrating with melted ice cream cones and skipping stones across the water. Lila whispered to my stomach every chance she got, promising to teach the baby how to draw and telling them all sorts of secrets about which cookies in the pantry were the best. On the way home, Daniel held my hand and kissed my knuckles. Thank you for trusting me, he murmured. I turned to him. Thank you for staying even when it scared you. We pulled into the driveway just as the sun began to dip behind the trees, casting long shadows that stretched across the yard like the arms of a world that had finally decided to embrace us instead of chase us. Inside, Lila ran upstairs to draw what she insisted was our first family portrait as an official team. When she returned, she held up a picture of 4 figures standing under a little house. 2 tall, 1 small, 1 baby drawn as a tiny circle with arms sticking out. Above it, she had written 1 word, home. Daniel lifted her into his arms. That is exactly what we are. That evening, after Lila drifted to sleep and the house hummed with the quiet peace I once thought I would never know, I stepped out onto the porch. The moon hung bright over the lake, silver light rippling across the surface. Daniel joined me, slipping his hand into mine as though it had always belonged there. You know, he said softly, 1 year ago you followed your daughter into a snowstorm. I leaned my head against his shoulder, and it led me here. He kissed the top of my head. You were never lost. You were just looking for the place that was meant to find you. I looked out at the water at the warm house behind us, at the family we had built not from luck or perfection, but from choice after choice after choice. I thought I followed my daughter into the snow to find her mother. But really, we were being led home. And for the first time in my life, home felt like something that would never leave. There are stories we hear, and then there are stories we feel, the kind that stay in our chest long after the screen goes dark. If you made it to this moment, if you walked every mile of snow, fear, hope, heartbreak, and healing with us, then maybe this wasn't just a story for you. Maybe it was a reminder. A reminder that even in the coldest nights, someone is searching for us with a light in their hands. A reminder that love can grow again in places we thought were ruined forever. A reminder that family isn't always something we are born into, but something we choose stitch by stitch, moment by moment, with the people who refuse to leave. Sometimes life breaks us in quiet ways. A slammed door. A goodbye no one warned us about. A child wiping her own tears because there was no one else to do it. Sometimes we carry those memories for years tucked behind our ribs, pretending we have moved on, even when the truth is we are still waiting for someone to say, "You can rest now. You're safe." If watching this story brought back your own winters, your own lonely mornings, your own battles fought behind closed doors, then breathe with me for a moment. You survived all of that. You stood up again. You loved again. Or maybe you're still learning how to. And that's all right. Healing isn't a straight line. It loops and curls and circles back, but every step forward is still a step. Maybe you saw yourself in the mother trying to protect her child with everything she had. Maybe you saw yourself in the little girl longing for a home where she didn't have to tiptoe. Maybe you saw yourself in the man who tried so hard to be strong that he forgot it was okay to be human too. Wherever this story touched you, let that part of your heart breathe. Let it know that it is not alone. Let it know that it deserves a gentle place to land. Because here in this little corner of the internet, we believe in second chances. We believe in good men who step out of warm cars into snowstorms because something in them refuses to look away. We believe in women who rise from the ashes of their past, carrying both their scars and their strength with quiet grace. We believe in children who teach us more about courage than any book ever could. And we believe in you. In your resilience, your softness, your hope that refuses to die, even when the world around you feels unbearably cold. If this story warmed you even for a moment, if it made you remember that love can still happen after fear, that family can still happen after loss, that safety can still happen after danger, then stay with us a little longer. There are more stories waiting for you here. Stories that will make you cry. Breathe hope, and maybe even heal in ways you didn't know you needed. Stories where justice comes slow but arrives with thunder. Stories where broken people find each other in the dark. Stories where joy is quiet and steady like a lamp left on for someone coming home late. So, before you go, before life pulls you back into its noise and rush, take a second to subscribe. Not just to a channel, but to a community of hearts like yours. Hit that hype button if you felt even a single tear rise, not for the metrics, but because it tells us you're here and you're feeling this with us. Leave a comment if you want. Tell us what part of the story held your hand. Tell us what part reminded you of your own journey. Or simply write, "I'm here," and we'll know what it means. Wherever you're watching from tonight, whether it's a quiet kitchen, a dim bedroom, a lonely apartment, or a warm home full of laughter, remember this: even after the longest winter, the sun still rises. Even after the deepest wound, the heart still finds ways to love. And sometimes, when we least expect it, a story can hand us back a piece of ourselves we thought was lost in the snow. Stay safe, stay tender, and stay with us. More stories are waiting.